When the Dark Lord fell, the land trembled under the shock of his defeat. Orcs across Mordor and beyond felt an abrupt loosening in their minds, as though a chain had snapped. Under the blazing eye, these creatures had marched in unwavering terror, compelled by Sauron's will. The eye was gone, and the shriek of its final loss echoed across the plains, leaving the orcs disoriented. Some collapsed where they stood, their hearts robbed of all direction. Others fled wildly, not caring which path they took, so long as it led away from Gondor's vengeance and the ruin of their fortresses. They had been bred for war. In earlier ages, Morgoth himself twisted beings into these shapes, and the orcs that came after carried a legacy of hatred. Through centuries, orcs fought under new tyrants, from the fallen Vala Morgoth to Sauron, the traitorous Maia. The orcs themselves seldom carved out history, for they lived only to obey or survive, never imagining a life beyond the lash or the Iron Banner. Now, with Sauron's utter end, they discovered a hollow emptiness in place of that dominating command, a strange spark of fear that was not directed by any single voice. Many scattered into wastelands, some drifting back to the mountains. The strong might attempt to lead small bands, but no single force remained to unite them. In Mordor, the plain of Gorgoroth had once been thick with orcs. After Sauron's fall, columns of Gondor and Rohan advanced, cleansing strongholds and freeing slaves. Orc survivors crept into hidden ravines. Some retreated into the ash-laden wastes, scratching for water or scraps. Their once thriving forges fell silent. The great forges near the Mountain of Fire lay cold, doused by the cataclysmic end of the ring. In the darkness of corridors beneath ruined fortifications, orcs tried to reorganize. Their chieftains barked frantic orders, but disputes grew fierce. Without Sauron's dread presence, many orcs turned upon each other. Blood feuds erupted. The old discipline melted, replaced by savage infighting. Whichever group won might hold a portion of the fortress for a while, but the armies of men advanced day by day. Soon, those orcs who did not flee or starve were hunted down. When watchers from Minas Tirith later ventured across the plains of Mordor, they found only wretched pockets of orcs eking out a sorry existence, skulking beneath black crags or scrabbling in old storage pits. Beyond Mordor's boundaries, orcs likewise lost all sense of leadership. In Mirkwood, Dol Guldur had been a seat of Sauron's power for long years, and the orcs that clustered in the southern forest felt the same sudden shock at his end. The elves from Thranduil's realm and the allies of Lorien struck swiftly at Dol Guldur, toppling its walls. Some orcs fled into the deeper forest, but Greenwood had awakened to new victory. Pushed out by renewed vigilance from the elves, these orcs might try to cross the mountains. Yet the eagles soared overhead, the dwarves and men guarded passes, and scattered orc kin found no safe path. They hid in dark gullies and caverns, haunted by the memory of Sauron's eye. The forest itself seemed to reject them as light crept back into once enshadowed groves. In the Misty Mountains, orcs survived longer. For many ages, those peaks had harbored orcish strongholds that extended labyrinthine corridors beneath the stone. They did not rely solely on Sauron's commands. Though he influenced them, their chieftains in Gundabad or Moria often cared more for local raids and capturing dwarven riches than for global conquest. After Sauron's fall, those orcs felt a lesser shock, for they had not devoted themselves as wholly as those in Mordor. But rumors of the new King Elessa's realm caused fear. The men and elves who triumphed in the south might eventually turn north to root out orcs entirely. With no hope of Sauron's future protection or the promise of his triumph, these orcs found themselves more isolated. Yet they maintained pockets of defiance, occasionally raiding travelers on mountain passes. The Dunedain and Dwarves kept watch, driving them back. Over time, these once mighty clans diminished. Only small infestations endured, breeding in the deep recesses of the mountains. They remained dangerous on a local scale, but never again formed vast armies that threatened entire kingdoms. Some orcs tried to band under new warlords. Scattered testimonies speak of petty tyrants calling themselves heirs of Sauron. Most attempts collapsed swiftly as rival chieftains assassinated one another for scraps of territory. None possessed the potent will that Sauron had displayed, and none could forge a unified horde. Their mutual treachery proved unstoppable. An orc warband might linger a year or two, raiding remote villages before men tracked them. Then, the band was either wiped out or pushed further into wild frontiers. In the Near East or far south, stray orcish enclaves might have found refuge, but no accounts show them reviving an empire. The days of orcish armies mobilized by a single dark power were gone. In the War of the Rings aftermath, the Free Peoples wanted no illusions of mercy. The orcs were widely considered irredeemable. Though rumors occasionally emerged of orcs casting aside warfare, these stories were few and uncertain. For the most part, orcs, if they survived, clung to hidden warrens, preyed on each other or on weaker creatures, and struck at stragglers or unwary travelers. Men, elves, and dwarves called it a slow purge, ridding Middle-earth of a festering threat that had lost its master. A new age dawned, and the orcs had no place in it. They had been instruments of a dark will, bred for conflict and overshadowed by cruelty. By the time the Fourth Age settled, many believed the orcs either nearly extinct or reduced to scattered scavengers. A handful might roam the remotest corners, plying ambushes along seldom-used roads. Yet men reclaimed farmland, dwarves reopened mines, elves guarded their realms or took ship into the west. In that changing world, orc kind carried a doomed legacy. They had relied on their master's might, and now, in his absence, they floundered. Even their violent spirit could not sustain them against a united Middle-earth determined to cast out all remnants of the shadow. Some pockets of evil might endure in underground recesses, awaiting a new darkness, but they would not soon threaten entire kingdoms again. Click below and reward yourself with another fascinating and exciting story.